What kind of parents look their child in the eye and say, "You don't deserve your own success?" Because that's exactly what mine did. My name is Fergus Mercer. And if there's one thing I've learned in life, it's that family isn't always a source of love. Sometimes, it's just a burden you're forced to carry. I never had a place in mine, not really. My parents made that clear from the start. My younger brother, Jordan, was the golden child. I was the afterthought. I don't know why I'm posting this. Maybe because I need to get it out. Maybe because, for the first time in my life, I feel like I don't exist. Like I never really mattered to them. And for years, I told myself it didn't matter. I worked hard, got into college on a scholarship, juggled part-time jobs just to stay afloat. For years of grinding, sacrificing, pushing myself beyond my limits. And somehow, I made it. Summa cum laude. Double major. A full ride for my master's. But when my graduation day finally came, when I should have been celebrating, my mother leaned in and whispered something that made my blood run cold. "When you get your diploma, hand it to Jordan. He deserves it more." I laughed, waiting for the punchline. But there wasn't one. "You already have a job," she added, as if that made any of this logical. "He needs this more than you do." My father nodded. Jordan didn't even look up from his phone, and that's when I knew it didn't matter what I did. I would never be enough for them. This is a real story we found on Reddit. If your own family did this to you, what would you do? Let us know in the comments. To hear the rest of Fergus's story, subscribe to Reddit True Vault. I used to think my parents were just unfair. That they played favorites because, well, some parents just do. But I was wrong. It was deeper than that. I didn't figure it out until years later, when an aunt, one of the few relatives who actually gave a damn about me, let something slip over coffee. She didn't mean to, but once she said it, she couldn't take it back. "Your mom always felt guilty about Jordan, you know. About what happened before he was born." I stared at her, confused. What happened before he was born? She hesitated, then sighed. "You were too young to remember. But there was supposed to be another baby. Your little sister. Catherine was pregnant. About 5 months along. I felt something in my stomach twist. What do you mean, supposed to be?" She looked uncomfortable. "There was an accident. She fell. She lost the baby." I sat there, gripping my coffee cup, feeling like the ground beneath me had shifted. "You were there, Fergus." And suddenly, it all came rushing back. I must have been 3, maybe 4 years old. I remember playing near the staircase, my mother telling me to slow down. I remember laughing, running past her feet, bumping into her leg. Then the sound of something heavy hitting the floor. I didn't understand at the time. All I knew was that my mother was crying, that my father was shouting, that there was a rush of people, and then, nothing. I swallowed hard. I pushed her, not on purpose, my aunt said quickly. "You were just a toddler. It was an accident." But Catherine, she never really forgave you for it. And that's when it clicked. That's why they never loved me the same way they loved Jordan. I wasn't just the independent one. I was the reason they lost their other child. And Jordan? He wasn't just the golden child. He was their second chance. We weren't always struggling. Growing up, we had a nice house, vacations every summer, the kind of life that makes you think your parents have their shit together. I didn't realize it was all built on a house of cards. My dad, Richard Mercer, had a gambling problem. My mom, Catherine, had a spending problem. It was the perfect storm of financial self-destruction. Every dollar that came in went straight back out. But they kept up the illusion, kept pretending like we were better off than we were. Even when the money started disappearing, they didn't stop. Dad was convinced he'd hit it big one day. Mom refused to believe we weren't the wealthy family she pretended we were. And so, they made sacrifices. Not in their own lives, of course. No, they just picked who was worth investing in. And surprise, surprise, it wasn't me. Jordan got everything. At 16, he got a brand new car. A luxury one, too. Not some used junker. When I asked if I could at least get something to help me get to work, my mom scoffed. "Your brother needs a reliable car. You'll be fine." When college applications rolled around, Jordan had 0 ambition, 0 grades, 0 drive. But that didn't matter. My parents pulled every string they could, paid for him to go to a private university. He partied his way through freshman year, failed half his classes, and got kicked out. I thought that would be the moment they finally saw him for who he was. But no, it was the school's fault. The professors were unfair. The system was broken. "He's just finding himself," they said. "He'll figure it out." Meanwhile, I worked my ass off, got into a state school on a full scholarship, and still had to juggle 3 part-time jobs just to afford textbooks and food. When I asked if they could help, just a little, my mom waved me off. "You're smart. You'll figure it out. Translation? Jordan deserved help. I didn't. I didn't realize how deep the financial hole was until it was too late. By the time I was in my last year of college, my parents were drowning. Credit cards maxed out. Second mortgage on the house. And worse, they had turned to people you don't borrow from unless you're desperate. I didn't know about it at first. They hid it well. But one day, I got a call from a bank about a loan application I had supposedly submitted. Except I hadn't. Turns out, my parents had tried to take out a loan in my name. They got denied because I had my own student loans and no credit history. But the fact that they even tried, that was enough. And when the banks wouldn't give them what they wanted, they turned to someone else. Someone who didn't care about credit scores. Someone who only cared about getting paid back, no matter what it took. They borrowed from loan sharks. And when they couldn't pay it back, they told them I would. I didn't know any of this at the time. I was too busy trying to survive my own life. But looking back, the signs were there. The hushed conversations. The way my dad started acting paranoid, checking the windows at night. My mom clinging even harder to the fantasy that everything was fine. And Jordan? He was the same as always. Oblivious. Untouchable. Still living in the world where he was the prince and I was just some extra. I found out the truth the hard way. But that's a story for later. Right now, I just keep thinking, how the hell did I not see it sooner? I should have felt something. Pride, relief, maybe even happiness. But standing there, diploma in hand, all I felt was nothing. Not because I didn't care. I did. For years of breaking my back, balancing classes and work, sacrificing sleep, social life, everything. I had done it. I had graduated. Not just that. I had graduated top of my class, full ride for my master's. And yet, when the announcement came, when the audience erupted in applause, when everyone around me was celebrating, my family just sat there, staring, like they had just watched something be stolen from them. I remember gripping the diploma a little tighter, like I had to hold on to it. Like they might actually try to take it from me. And then, of course, they did. It happened so fast. The ceremony had barely ended when my mother grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. Give it to Jordan. No explanation. No congratulations. Just an order, like I was some delivery boy handing over someone else's package. I must have laughed, because I remember the way her face twisted, like I was the one being unreasonable. I pulled away, shaking my head. Was she serious? After everything, my dad, always the one to step in when her words weren't enough, just glared. Something about how ungrateful I was. How they had done so much for me. And this was how I repaid them. I don't remember my exact words. Just that something inside me snapped. Everything. What everything? 22 years of being ignored. Of having to figure out everything alone while they handed Jordan the world on a silver platter? I must have said something that pissed them off. Because Jordan finally looked up from his phone, sighing like this whole thing was some minor inconvenience. Dude, it's just a piece of paper. Don't be selfish. Just a piece of paper. That's what he said. Like it wasn't 4 years of my life. Like it wasn't missed sleep, missed meals, jobs that drained me, nights spent wondering if I'd even make it. Like it wasn't mine. I don't even know what I said back. I just remember realizing, all at once, that they were never going to change. That no amount of success would ever make me worthy in their eyes. That if they couldn't take credit for what I did, they would rather take it away. So I walked away. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't look back. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. But freedom didn't feel like I thought it would. When I got back to my tiny apartment, I just sat there. Diploma still in my hands, resting on the table like I had to keep it in sight. Like if I looked away for too long, it might disappear. The silence was deafening. No texts, no calls. Like I had stopped existing the moment I stopped being useful to them. I should have expected that. I did expect that. But it still stung. I don't know how long I sat there, just staring at the walls, replaying everything in my head. The way my mother looked at me, like I was betraying them by keeping what was mine. My father's disappointment, like I had done something unforgivable. Jordan's sheer indifference, like none of it ever mattered. And I realized something. I had spent years trying to prove myself to people who never cared. Years chasing something I was never going to get. The saddest part? I didn't even know what I had lost, because I had never really had it to begin with. That night, I placed my diploma in a drawer and locked it away. I told myself I'd never let them take anything from me again. And for the first time in my life, I actually meant it. I thought I was free. For 2 years, my phone had been silent. No guilt trips. No passive-aggressive messages. No reminders that I was somehow the selfish one for choosing myself. I built something real. A career, stability, my own space where no one could touch me. and I was finally, truly happy. Then, out of nowhere, my mother called. I almost didn't answer. I should have ignored it, let it go to voicemail like all the others. But something in me, the part of me that still hadn't been fully scrubbed clean of obligation, picked up. The first thing I noticed was her voice. Shaky, strained. She sounded old. It took me a second to even recognize it. And then came the words that I had known, deep down, were inevitable. My father was sick. They were in trouble. They needed help. I should have hung up right then and there. I had no reason to care. I owed them nothing. But then she said something that made my stomach tighten. If I didn't help, they would lose everything. And the people they owed wouldn't let them walk away. That was new. That was enough to make me pay attention. I don't know why I went back. Curiosity, maybe. Or maybe I just wanted to see them fail. To witness, firsthand, the result of years of bad decisions finally catching up to them. Whatever the reason, a week later, I found myself pulling up to the house I hadn't seen since the day I walked away. It wasn't the house I remembered. The once pristine lawn was overgrown, the porch paint peeling, the driveway cracked. Everything about it felt abandoned, except it wasn't. I knocked. My mother opened the door, eyes wide with shock, like she hadn't actually expected me to show up. Then she started crying. I didn't hug her, didn't say anything, just stepped inside. The place looked ransacked. Not in the obvious, things thrown everywhere kind of way, but in the slow, desperate kind. Shelves half empty where things had clearly been sold. Stacks of unopened bills shoved onto the counter. That suffocating feeling of something rotting beneath the surface. And then there was my father. Thin, small, older than I had ever seen him. He looked at me like he wasn't sure whether to be relieved or pissed off that I had actually come. And that's when it hit me. They really were losing everything. It took less than 5 minutes for the truth to come out. The house was being foreclosed on. The medical bills were piling up. The debts were growing faster than they could keep up. But it wasn't just bad luck. It wasn't just a rough patch. They had borrowed money. Not from a bank. Not from a friend. From people who don't take IOUs. It was like a switch flipped in my brain. This wasn't just my parents being financially irresponsible again. This was worse. Much worse. They hadn't just screwed themselves over. They had tied their future to people who would do whatever it took to get their money back. And somehow, after all these years, they still had the audacity to act like it wasn't their fault. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get any more pathetic, Jordan walked in. Gold watch. Name brand sneakers. Phone in hand. Scrolling like this wasn't happening. He didn't even look at me before flopping onto the couch, completely unfazed by the disaster surrounding him. That was the moment I knew nothing had changed. They had learned nothing. The house was falling apart. The debt collectors were circling. But Jordan? Jordan was still living like he had a safety net. Because, in their minds, he did. Because I was supposed to be that safety net. And I think that's what made me laugh. Because they actually thought I would do it. They really thought I would be their way out. I asked how much they owed. Not because I was considering paying, but because I wanted to see just how deep they had dug this hole. The number made my stomach turn. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This wasn't a rough patch. This was years of greed, of bad decisions, of constantly choosing the easy way out, until there was no way out. And now they wanted me to fix it, to give up everything I had built, everything I had worked for, so they wouldn't have to face the consequences of their own choices. I looked at my father, still too proud to ask me directly. My mother, waiting for me to break. Jordan, acting like none of this involved him. And for the first time in my life, I felt nothing. Not guilt, not anger, not sadness, just nothing. I turned around and left. They called after me, but I didn't stop. Because I knew, deep down, this wasn't over. Not yet. I should have known it wasn't over. A month of silence. 30 whole days where I almost let myself believe they had finally given up. That they had accepted the consequences of their own actions. That, for once, they were going to clean up their own mess. Then the letter came. A thick envelope, neatly typed, with the name of a law firm I didn't recognize. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Some kind of scam or junk mail. But then I saw the names. Catherine and Richard Mercer. My parents were suing me. The official reason? Financial abandonment. Apparently, by refusing to bail them out, I had neglected my familial duty and left them in financial ruin despite being more than capable of helping. It would have been laughable if it wasn't so pathetic. They wanted money. A lot of it. Enough to cover their debts, their mortgage, and, let's be real, keep Jordan comfortably living like the spoiled brat he had always been. The lawsuit painted me as a cold, heartless son who had turned his back on the people who sacrificed everything for him. Never mind that I had been funding my own life since I was a teenager. Never mind that they had spent years treating me like an afterthought while pouring every ounce of love and resources into Jordan. None of that mattered, because now I was useful. Now I had money. Now I was supposed to pay up. I wasn't stupid enough to handle this alone. The same day I got the letter, I found myself sitting across from Lisa Caldwell, a lawyer I had been referred to by a friend. She was sharp, direct, and didn't waste time sugarcoating things. After skimming the lawsuit, she looked up at me with something almost like amusement. They actually think this will hold up in court? That was the moment I knew I had the right person on my side. Lisa didn't just want to defend me. She wanted to bury them. The deeper Lisa dug into my parents' finances, the worse it got. The debts weren't just bad. They were catastrophic. They owed money everywhere. Banks, credit cards, private lenders, and, of course, the loan sharks. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, all wasted on years of reckless spending and gambling. But the worst part? They had tried to use my name. Lisa found multiple instances where my mother had attempted to take out loans under my identity. Most had been denied, but the fact that she had even tried made my blood boil. She had been willing to destroy my future just to keep funding Jordan's lifestyle. Lisa sat across from me, fingers tapping against the desk as she laid out the facts. I didn't just have a defense. I had a counterattack. We didn't just file a motion to dismiss their lawsuit. We sued them back. Fraud, identity theft, attempted financial manipulation. Lisa wasn't playing fair. She was playing to win. The moment my parents received the countersuit, they panicked. The confidence they had when they thought they could manipulate me vanished. Suddenly, they weren't so sure of themselves anymore. They tried to reach out, calling, texting, even showing up at my workplace. I ignored every attempt. If they wanted to talk to me, they could do it in court. The week before the first hearing, my mother sent one final message. A long, rambling email about how families shouldn't fight like this. How she and my father had made mistakes, but they didn't deserve to be punished like this. How they were willing to drop everything if I would just come to the table and talk. Translation: they knew they were screwed. They wanted me to back down because they couldn't handle the consequences of what they had started. And for the first time in my life, I had all the power. I stared at the email for a long time before closing my laptop. I wasn't backing down. Not this time. There was a part of me, a small, stupid, pathetic part, that still thought maybe, just maybe, they would stop. That if they admitted what they had done, if they apologized, not just for this lawsuit, but for everything, I could finally close this chapter and move on. I wasn't looking for reconciliation. I didn't want them back in my life. But I would have walked away. I would have left them to their mess, let them figure out their own downfall. But they didn't stop. And when Lisa showed me what she had found, I realized they never planned to. It started with a financial audit. Lisa was thorough. She wasn't just interested in shutting down their lawsuit. She wanted to see how deep the rot went. And that's when she found it. A loan agreement. Signed under my name, my social security number, my forged signature. At first, I thought it was just another attempt to take out credit cards in my name. Another desperate move to scrape together a few $1,000s. But it was worse. It was a guarantee. A personal guarantee. My parents hadn't just tried to take out money in my name. They had used me as collateral. I remember sitting there, staring at the document, my brain trying to process what I was looking at. Lisa's voice cut through the fog. If this loan defaulted, and of course, it had, I wasn't just a victim. I was legally responsible. And if I didn't fight it, if I didn't expose it for what it was, I could be seen as complicit. This wasn't just stealing money. This was stealing my identity to cover their own asses. And if that wasn't enough, the lender? It wasn't a bank. It was the same people my parents had borrowed from before. The kind of people who don't send overdue notices. The kind of people who collect in blood. I don't remember getting up. I don't remember walking out of Lisa's office. I just remember the feeling, like the last thread of obligation, of familial guilt, had been burned away. They hadn't just ruined their own lives. They had tried to take me down with them, and I was done. Lisa took the evidence straight to the authorities. The investigation moved fast, faster than I expected. Maybe because there was already a file on my parents. Maybe because the financial fraud unit had been waiting for something like this to nail the loan operation. Or maybe because, for the first time, someone had put everything together. By the end of the week, my parents weren't just facing a civil lawsuit. They were looking at criminal charges, fraud, identity theft, financial misconduct. And just like that, the house of cards collapsed. The last time I saw them was in the courtroom. My father, once so sure of himself, looked hollowed out. My mother wouldn't even look at me. Jordan wasn't there. He had disappeared the moment things turned ugly, probably running to whatever friend, girlfriend, or sugar mama would take him in. For the first time in his life, He had no safety net. For the first time in their lives, neither did they. The judge ruled in my favor. Of course, they did. Their case had been a joke from the start, but watching their reaction, there was no satisfaction. No sense of victory, just emptiness. Because in that moment, I realized I had spent my whole life trying to prove myself to people who never saw me as anything but a resource. And now that they had nothing left to take, I was finally free. The aftermath was almost predictable. The legal system moved forward. The financial records were picked apart, and with every uncovered lie, their situation got worse. The banks seized what little they had left. The government took interest in the unpaid taxes, the fraudulent applications. Every door they had once used to escape accountability was slamming shut. And then there were the loan sharks. See, I wasn't the one who owed them money. I wasn't the one who had made a deal with them. And without me in the equation, there was no one left to save them. I didn't ask what happened next. I didn't have to. Word travels fast in small towns, and it wasn't long before I heard whispers that the people my parents owed weren't interested in excuses, that Jordan had resurfaced just long enough to beg someone, anyone, for a way out. That, for the first time in their lives, there was no easy fix. I should have felt bad. I didn't, because at the end of the day, they had made their choices. And for once, I wasn't one of them. When I left the courthouse, Lisa was waiting. She didn't say much, just gave me this look like she knew exactly what was going through my head. Then she smiled. "You okay?" For the first time in a long time, I actually meant it when I said, "Yeah, I think I am." I never expected to see him again. Not after everything that had happened. Not after I walked out of that courtroom for the last time, knowing I would never have to deal with them again. But there he was, Jordan, standing on my doorstep. He didn't look like himself. The perfectly styled hair? Gone. The expensive clothes? Replaced with something wrinkled, stained, and 2 sizes too big. Even the arrogance, the untouchable, effortless confidence he had carried his entire life, was gone. For the first time ever, Jordan looked small. And then he spoke, and I realized he wasn't here to fight. He was here to beg. He was shaking. Not from the cold. From fear. I almost didn't recognize his voice. Hoarse, panicked, barely above a whisper as he tried to explain that the money was gone, that the house was gone, that my parents had nothing left, that the people they owed weren't the kind of people who just walk away. I should have felt something. Pity, guilt, maybe even the satisfaction of seeing the golden boy finally crumble under the weight of his own choices. But I didn't feel anything, because deep down, I knew this moment had been inevitable. Jordan just didn't realize it until now. Lisa was standing behind me. She didn't say anything, didn't move, just watched. She didn't need to remind me that this wasn't my problem anymore, that I didn't owe them anything. I already knew. But as I stood there, staring at the wreckage of what used to be my brother, I realized something else. For the longest time, I thought I was running from my past. That if I worked hard enough, earned enough, became successful enough, I could erase the part of me that had once been desperate for their love. But I wasn't running. I was building. I had a life now. A real life. One that wasn't defined by their choices, their expectations, or their manipulation. For the first time ever, I had a future that didn't include them. And I wasn't about to let them take that from me. Jordan kept talking, voice cracking, begging me to help. I didn't respond. I just looked at him, at the person who had spent his entire life getting everything handed to him, now standing in front of me with nothing. And then I did something I never thought I'd do. I turned around and closed the door. I didn't check to see if he was still there. I didn't listen for his footsteps. I just stood in the quiet of my own home, letting the weight of it all settle. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly, completely free. Because I finally understood. Family isn't blood. Family is the people who stand by you, who choose you, who love you for who you are, not for what you can give them. And I would have that, not with them, but with the family I would build for myself. And as I closed that chapter of my life, I realized letting go wasn't just about walking away from them. It was also about opening myself up to something real, something I never thought I could have. I used to think love wasn't meant for people like me, not in the dramatic, self-pitying way, just in the simple, logical sense. I had spent so much of my life fighting, surviving, trying to build something out of nothing. There was no time for romance, no space in my life for something as delicate as love. But then there was Lisa, and somehow, without me even realizing it, she had changed everything. It didn't happen all at once. There wasn't a single defining moment, no grand realization where I suddenly knew I loved her. It was gradual. It was in the way she saw right through me from the start. The way she never treated me like a case, but like a person. The way she challenged me, pushed back when I needed it, but always stood by my side. We spent hours together, not just on the case, but outside of it. Late nights in her office. Cups of coffee going cold between us as we pored over documents. Quiet conversations that drifted from legal strategy to life, to childhood, to things I had never told another soul. And somewhere in between the court filings, the arguments, the shared silences, she became my person. 2 days before Jordan showed up at my door, Lisa kissed me. It wasn't some dramatic, desperate thing. It was quiet, almost hesitant, like she was giving me the chance to pull away. I didn't. And when I finally asked, really asked, if this was what she wanted, if she was sure, she just smiled. And for the first time in my life, someone had chosen me, not out of obligation, not because they needed something from me, just because they wanted me. So when I closed that door on Jordan, when I let go of the last pieces of a life I had never truly belonged to, I didn't feel lost. I didn't feel alone. I felt like I was finally walking toward something better, toward a future I had built for myself. And for once, I wasn't walking alone. Some stories don't have happy endings, but maybe that's okay. Maybe the real victory isn't in fixing the past, but in choosing to walk away from it. Fergus spent his whole life trying to earn love from people who never saw him as more than a resource. And in the end, his greatest act of strength wasn't in fighting them. It was in refusing to be used by them ever again. Because family isn't about blood. It's about the people who choose you. The ones who stand by you, not because they have to, but because they want to. And sometimes, the best thing you can do is build a new family for yourself. What do you think? If you were in Fergus's shoes, would you have walked away? Or would you have given them one last chance? Let us know in the comments. And if you want to hear more real stories like this one, taken straight from Reddit, don't forget to subscribe to Reddit True Vault.